All right. Well, welcome everybody to our monthly UCSF-Stanford CERC FDA seminar, Distinguished Speaker Series seminar on cybersecurity for biomedical engineering. I'm your host and moderator, Professor Kevin Fu, from the Archimedes Center for Healthcare and Medical Device Cybersecurity at Northeastern University in Boston. A quick disclaimer. This seminar series does not represent the official FDA policy or guidance. The contents are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the official views of, nor an endorsement by FDA, HHS, or the US government. This seminar is being recorded. Just a little bit about myself. I'm glad to be continuing as your host after previously serving as the acting director of medical device cybersecurity at FDA CDRH. I'm a professor at Northeastern University and direct the Archimedes Center for Healthcare and Medical Device Cybersecurity. A couple of announcements from FDA. Probably many of you have heard about the reorganization at FDA. You can read about that on the FDA CDRH website with the Office of Strategic Technology and Partnerships. Now having the division for medical device cybersecurity. If you're interested in a career in cybersecurity, you can contact Diane.Mitchell at fda.hhs.gov. Well, you don't have to go too far in the news to see some of the challenges being faced by healthcare delivery, especially when it comes to problems like ransomware that is making it very difficult to deliver patient care. And of course, this is born in manufacturing as well as the operations of those medical devices in the field. Cybersecurity is really key for biomedical engineering, not only for medical devices, but also for pharmaceutical manufacturing, because it's just so centrally tied not only to the manufacturing of the device, but the operation of the device. There's been a number of interesting changes in law over the last couple of years. You probably recall the Patch Act, and then later the Omnibus Bill that has led to the creation of the first statutes requiring cybersecurity engineering review by the Food and Drug Administration of medical devices. The FDA also released last year the finalized version of its cybersecurity in medical devices, quality system considerations and content of pre-market submissions. This is effectively, from my perspective, the cybersecurity engineering expectations for what goes into a medical device to get clearance or pre-market approval. Now, this seminar series has been going on for a couple years. We've had a number of distinguished speakers, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Jessica Wilkerson from the US Food and Drug Administration. She is the Senior Cyber Policy Advisor, as well as the Medical Device Cybersecurity Team Lead within the new division of medical device cybersecurity, or DMDC, at FDA. And today I'm happy to host that she's going to be giving an overview of FDA's medical device cybersecurity authorities and program. I would say this is really important for the industry because there have been so many changes in the last couple of years. So today you'll get a little bit of one-stop shopping, and you'll also find that we have a Q&A feature. We will be getting to questions at the end. But certainly lodge your questions in there if you'd like to be considered to have your question asked at the end of the seminar. So I give you Jessica Wilkerson. Thank you for joining the seminar series.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for the invite. I do see some familiar faces in the virtual audience. So some of you may have seen many of these slides before and also heard me talk on these slides before, but hopefully we can keep it fresh and new. So as Kevin stated, I was invited here today to talk about an overview of FDA's medical device cybersecurity authorities and program. And what we always like to start out with is the why. Why is there an FDA medical device cybersecurity program? Why was FDA granted authorities specific to medical device cybersecurity? And at the end of the day, and I think this is probably not an audience where I really need to belabor this point, but cybersecurity is important because cybersecurity is a part of safety and effectiveness. The way that we tend to pose this question is, can you have a safe and effective device if you do not have a cyber secure device? And especially today, and very much on an increasing trajectory into the future, the answer is no, right? No, you can't have a safe and effective device if you don't have a cyber secure device. We've seen this over and over and over again with the ransomware incidents in hospitals that have created issues for medical device cybersecurity and safety. We've seen this with the cybersecurity vulnerabilities specific to medical devices that, if exploited, could lead to patient harm. So this is not really a question, right? But it is a fact. You must have a cybersecure device to have a safe and effective device. And safe and effective, for those who don't know, we'll get into this, is part of the regulation. It is the law. That is how you determine whether or not a medical device is allowed to be a medical device in the United States. But for those of you who are particularly familiar with FDA's regulatory paradigms and how we do reviews, important to note that we have found 510(k) submissions to be not substantially equivalent and pre-market approval devices to be not approvable based on cybersecurity concerns alone. And I will tell you a little secret. This was pre-explicit cybersecurity authorities that we were already doing this. So now we have explicit cybersecurity authorities. You can guess how much higher that bar may now be for trying to get a finding of substantially equivalent or a finding of approvable when the cybersecurity parts of the device are not necessarily as strong as they should be. But moving right along. So to give a quick bit of background and then dive into the specific section here, FDA has a very unique regulatory paradigm when it comes to United States regulatory authority agencies. Most agencies do not get the ability to essentially say yes or no to a device entering the market, right? Like if Target, I love to, no offense to Target, but like if Target wants to put a product into commerce in the United States, and it's just some like dinky consumer electronics product, they typically don't have to go ask permission from a federal agency like, hey, can we please sell this device in the United States? If you want to sell a medical device in the United States, in a lot of cases, in an overwhelming majority of cases, you do have to ask for permission first. And that gives FDA a really unique position to be able to influence the safety, security, and efficacy of medical devices in the country. So the overall legal bar for FDA to say, like, yes, you can sell this device in the United States is a demonstration by the medical device manufacturer that the device provides a reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness. As stated previously, we have viewed for over a decade, for even longer than that, cybersecurity as part of safety. As of March 29th, 2023, and this is what this slide is saying, now there is another bar. For certain types of devices, and we'll get into the definition of exactly what kinds, now you also, as a medical device manufacturer, asking for permission to sell your device in the United States, must demonstrate that the device and related systems provide a reasonable assurance that they are cyber secure. So now cybersecurity is an explicit regulatory bar that medical device manufacturers of certain devices have to meet, which is not nothing, right? So this act, this specific explicit cybersecurity authority was added on December 29th, 2022 to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act via something that we call just shorthand as the omnibus. But there was a big government funding package passed at the end of December 2022, and it contained in it a section called Ensuring Cybersecurity of Medical Devices, which gave FDA this explicit authority. And that authority, as I stated before, kicked in on March 29th, 2023. So anything approved, coming into the agency and approved after March 29th, 2023, that qualifies as one of these special types of devices, must be able to provide that reasonable assurance that the device and related systems are cyber secure. So this is what a cyber device is. The big things to consider here, I'm not going to read this to you. The things to consider here, right, is it involves software. The main thing is software. Does this thing have software in it? And really, I have a hard time conceptualizing a piece of software that is not vulnerable to a cyber threat. So 1 and 3 are pretty much kind of automatic. If you have software, that software is probably vulnerable to cyber threats. So you've met 2 of the provisions for being a cyber device. The question becomes 2, and this is where we're having a lot of fun right now, both with the agency and with the medical device manufacturers about what this means. Because if you look at what 2 says, it says that if you have a medical device that has the ability to connect to the internet and meets these other 2 criteria, you are a cyber device. So there are medical device manufacturers who are like, well, you know, our device doesn't connect to the internet, right? Like it is not designed, it is not intended. We actively tell people, don't connect this thing to the internet. So therefore, we're not a cyber device. But I would encourage everyone to read what the text says, not what we want it to say or what anybody wants it to say, what the text actually says. What the text says is the device has the ability. It doesn't say that it was designed to connect. It doesn't say that it was intended to connect. It says that it has the ability to connect. And so if you think of things like Bluetooth connectivity, RF connectivity, the fact that it has a USB port, that it has an Ethernet port or whatever, very significant chance that the device has the ability to connect to the internet, regardless of what anyone intends or actually tries to do with the device. A couple of other things to consider in the 524B requirements. So this is, we love this law, right? We've said it publicly, we continue to say it publicly, we love this law. Certain things that cyber devices must do. They must submit a plan to the FDA for monitoring, identifying, and addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities, including coordinated vulnerability disclosure. So for any of you who happen to be cybersecurity researchers who like to go out and find vulnerabilities and then work with the company to fix them, in the medical device sector for cyber devices, medical device manufacturers must have a process for supporting that kind of engagement. Medical device manufacturers of cyber devices must now also design, develop, and maintain the processes and procedures to provide that reasonable assurance that the device and related systems are cyber secure. And separate from that, separate but related, devices have to be patchable, right? Like cyber devices must be patchable by law now. And patches have to come on a reasonable routine cycle, and then they have to happen ad hoc as needed for critical cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Another big thing that I would point out here, very similar to the last slide, we have conversations sometimes with folks about, well, there's the device, and then there's all the things that the device relies on, like the cloud or some remote capability or something that is happening that is not on the device itself. Pay attention again to what the text says. Must be cyber secure. It says that the device and related systems must provide that reasonable assurance of cybersecurity. Not that the device must provide reasonable assurance of cybersecurity, that the device and related systems have to provide it. So we think that that's very important. Another thing that we love, and we're actually one of the first federal agencies to get this authority, it's not even that we are allowed to ask for it. Manufacturers must provide it. Even if we didn't want it, they still must provide it. Software bill of materials information along with their cyber devices. We, of course, do want it. We think that this is incredibly important. So we're really happy that that came along with the authority that we got. And then finally, there is actually a provision in the new law that says if we find that we need more authority than that isn't here or that we don't have, we can promulgate a rule. We can get it if we can convince everyone that we should be able to get it. So as Kevin stated, we did also finalize our pre-market cybersecurity guidance. I assume quite a few folks are familiar with what a guidance is and why it matters. But the bottom line when it comes to guidance is you cannot, and I'm actually in the middle of doing this for unrelated reasons, you cannot open up FDA's regulations, read through them, and understand, now I know how to make a cyber secure medical device compliant with FDA regulations, right? Like there's nothing, there is no how-to guide in the FDA regulations for how to do that. So guidance is not just on cybersecurity, but on a variety of topics are how FDA communicates its recommendations to industry and to its own staff about this is what we think it means, or this is what we recommend that you do if you are trying to meet our regulations on a given topic. So the pre-market cybersecurity guidance is the best resource that medical device manufacturers and others can have to understand what FDA recommends manufacturers do to make a cyber secure medical device and related systems. This guidance was finalized on September 26, 2023, after a long public comment period. The recommendations go beyond Section 524B or those explicit authorities, but they do help manufacturers comply with that authority. It also addresses, for those who are, again, familiar with FDA's regulatory paradigm, how cybersecurity fits into the quality system requirements. So this is another big thing about how medical device manufacturers are regulated. They have to demonstrate that they have a quality system for manufacturing and maintaining medical devices. We connected in this guidance the specific parts that we saw where the QS regulation and cybersecurity meet in things that manufacturers should consider. There was a public webinar on November 2nd, which is publicly available. It's recorded. You can go watch it. And I think this is actually a little bit inaccurate. I forgot to update this bullet. But there is a walkthrough of the guidance in 524B content that is in eStar. So for those using these kinds of things, that's in eStar. A couple things to consider that were just some updates. We expanded the scope for a couple of technical things. We made a couple of structure changes related to public comment that we received. We added certain sections, like one on interoperability, and we added an appendix to help clarify, like, specifically what documents should manufacturers be submitting. And then finally, we received a lot of feedback on our software bill of materials section, and we made some updates to address that feedback. And I actually will highlight two of them in particular because they're very important. The industry accepted version of providing an SBOM has 7 minimum elements that everybody agrees these should be in the SBOM. We asked for additional things that are not those 7 minimum elements. We asked for end of support date and vulnerability information. What we did in the final version was clarify that information doesn't have to be in the SBOM, and there's good reasons, in fact, to not put it in the SBOM. You do still have to give it to us. You can just give it to us separately from the SBOM, is essentially what we said in the clarifications. So something to consider is that the pre-market cybersecurity guidance doesn't stand alone. It works together with something called the post-market cybersecurity guidance, which is, okay, my device has been approved, it's out there, oh, now I have a cybersecurity issue, what do I do? The post-market guidance is on that kind of, what do I do now that my device is in healthcare environments and something has happened? So the two feed each other. And what I mean by this is, if we see an issue in the post-market for cybersecurity, we go back to the pre-market cybersecurity guidance and we ask ourselves, does the pre-market cybersecurity guidance account for this risk? And if the answer is no, then we consider that as potential future updates for future guidance, or future things that we need to do in our policy so that we don't constantly have issues recurring. So the two drive each other in this virtuous circle. The other thing to consider on guidances is it's not just the pre-market cybersecurity guidance that matters, and it's not just the post-market cybersecurity guidance that matters. Depending on the exact way that a medical device is designed, there are many guidances that medical device manufacturers should be looking at. Things like off-the-shelf software, multiple functions, and other such things. So we highly recommend keeping in mind that there is a holistic approach to device safety and effectiveness generally that cybersecurity fits into and feeds. So a little bit on how a cybersecurity review actually works. So like I said, FDA has this unique authority where in many cases we get to say yay or nay to, can this device be sold in the United States? And the way that we do that is by getting information in what's called a pre-market submission from the medical device manufacturers, and then reviewing that information and making a determination based on it. That process is called a review. So for the cybersecurity portion of the review, a couple things to consider, right? One, that there's difference in how FDA looks at cybersecurity versus how it looks at something like software. Because software engineering is about ensuring that certain things happen. I have put hands on keyboard, I have programmed this thing to do something or some things in a certain way. Cybersecurity is about ensuring that certain things don't happen. And that's much harder, right? Because the universe of things that you don't want a medical device to be able to do is almost infinite compared to the things that you do want it to do. So how do you guard against the infinite things that I don't want to happen versus the things that I do want to happen? Other big thing that we tell manufacturers to keep in mind. The question is not, the question is, what can the device be made to do versus what it was designed to do? So medical device manufacturers typically do a very good job of saying, I have designed the device to do X, Y, Z. But they may, if somebody's really creative, they may be able to make the device do things that the medical device manufacturer never intended. And that's where the cybersecurity stuff really, really comes into play. Past performance, not future security. So if you had the world's most secure medical device 5 years ago, doesn't mean that it's the world's most secure medical device today. Doesn't even mean that the medical device is secure at all today, just given the way that cybersecurity evolves. So we do have conversations with folks, especially under the substantial equivalence paradigm of, yes, you have this device, it was approved 10 or 15 years ago. It may not be approvable today because the environment of use in the cybersecurity sense has changed. And one thing that we do recommend manufacturers do is we say, don't come at this question looking at motivation. Don't sit there and say, well, we don't really need to think about cybersecurity in our device because no one is ever going to hack it. Who actually wants to hack this particular medical device? That question is completely irrelevant. And you will be told by FDA, if you come and try to talk to us about this, that the question of motivation is completely irrelevant. It's not who is ever going to do that, it's can it happen? And if it can happen, your medical device needs to be designed to not let it happen. So starting to talk about some of the actual cybersecurity considerations. So cybersecurity applies if a device is or contains software. And if the device is a cyber device, cybersecurity documentation under 524B is required. You are not meeting the letter of the law if you do not provide it as part of your pre-market submission. And then something to consider, right? Cybersecurity considerations apply regardless of whether the software or software component was designed by the medical device manufacturer or a third party. So keep in mind, manufacturers and others, if you pull in a bunch of software to put in your medical device, you have become responsible for how that software behaves in the device. If there is a vulnerability, we're not going to call up the third party and ask the third party what they're doing. We're going to call you. Other things to consider. Risks increase if the device contains one or more of these types of interfaces. So for wired, USB, Ethernet, SD, CD, these kinds of things. From a wireless perspective, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, RF, if it uses cloud, etc. And as we stated, especially in the cyber device definition, it's for the entire system. The cybersecurity considerations apply for the entire system, not just for the end device. So that includes software update infrastructure, cloud applications, commercial devices like phones or tablets or computers. Those all have to be part of the cybersecurity considerations, and they all, if you're a cyber device, have to be part of that analysis of providing reasonable assurance that the device and these related systems are cyber secure. So I'm actually going to fly through this really fast. So just keeping in mind that there's a lot of detail that goes into this, I would recommend reading the guidance if you're interested in the specifics. But guidance documentation falls into 5 big categories, some of which I'll provide a little bit more detail on. Security risk management, what it sounds like, right? Security architecture, which I sometimes phrase in ways that I don't know my colleagues appreciate, but I think is accurate, which is draw us a picture, right? Security architecture is understanding cybersecurity and other digital infrastructure is really complicated if you're trying to describe it to me in words. You need to describe it to me in words, but also, can you draw me a picture? Can you show me the network diagram? Can you show me the system diagram in such a way that I can look at it and be like, oh, okay, that thing is talking to that thing is talking to this thing, and if that communication is severed, we have a problem. So it's very important that we have those kinds of diagrams, have that kind of information. Cybersecurity testing. You can have the best cybersecurity controls in the world that aren't worth the paper that you wrote them on if you don't test them to actually figure out whether or not they work. Labeling is you know those big like packets of information you get when you have like a prescription drug you're picking up from a pharmacy and you're sort of digging past it to try and get to the actual bottle of medication? That's labeling. That's everything that you need to know about this drug or this device in terms of maintaining it, how to take it, how to do it safely, et cetera. And then cybersecurity management plan, right? Cybersecurity exists across the entire life cycle of the device, and you have to have a plan for managing the cybersecurity across the entire life cycle. So that's what that is. To give a little bit more detail, security risk management applies to the entire system and should be integrated across a TPLC, so total product life cycle, TPLC. So this is an end-to-end assessment of cybersecurity risks and controls. For those who know, this is a parallel but interfacing process with ISO 14971, the safety risk management standard. And this needs to come in as part of the submission. Security risk management further breaks down into 6 additional sections: threat modeling, cybersecurity risk assessment, interoperability, third-party components, which is inclusive but not contained to SBOM, unresolved anomalies, and TPLC security risk management, sometimes phrased as metrics. So on the third-party software components, we do make a big point, like this is SBOM, but it is not just SBOM. But in terms of the SBOM, we make no secret of it. We are fully aligned with the NTA. We recommend that manufacturers provide us SBOMs consistent with the NTA elements, that they be machine readable, and so on. But we do highlight that that additional information on component support information and vulnerability assessments still has to come in. It can just come in separately. Security architecture, like I said, fancy way of saying draws pictures in different ways. We need a global system view, multi-patient harm view, updatability and patchability, and security use case. The other big thing in security architecture is the control categories. If you are actually a medical device manufacturer, your best friend is Appendix 1. And as a friend of mine, as Matt Hazlett states, Matt Hazlett is very integral to how cybersecurity reviews are performed here at FDA. You are going to be reviewed against Appendix 1, so go read Appendix 1. Cybersecurity testing. A couple different things that we're going to look for in cybersecurity testing. We're going to look for threat mitigation, vulnerability testing, pen testing. We're also going to look at the independence of your testers. So if the same people who built your system are the same people who are testing your system, we're going to have questions, right? Because you need somebody else to come in and have an unbiased, unconflicted ability to test your system. So there's recommendations in the guidance about independence and technical expertise of testing. Also scope. If you scope your testing badly, we might not accept your testing. If you only test the device and you don't test any of the related systems, we're probably not going to accept it, right? So testing is incredibly important and has a couple different pieces. Labeling, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Labeling is labeling. There's 14 recommended elements. You should probably consider human factors when you're doing it. And then cybersecurity management. This is where coordinated vulnerability disclosure processes are going to go, which is really important for us. And this is where management of vulnerabilities is going to be talked about. So a couple of quick hits, because I do want to make sure we have a good amount of time for questions. FDA is very committed to working internationally with other regulators and looking for opportunities to harmonize cybersecurity regulations across different countries. So there is something called the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, which is exactly what it sounds like. And at least for the Cybersecurity Working Group, which is something that was stood up, it was stood up in recognition that cybersecurity is a global issue, right? Like my cyber threat or your cyber threat is not going to stop at the border because it doesn't have a visa or whatever, right? Like it's going to keep going. And so we, as the international medical device regulators, need to be able to work together and have a really shared understanding of how we're going to manage cybersecurity across borders. So we've actually been co-leading the Cybersecurity Working Group underneath the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, and that has produced a couple of different things. One, it has produced an overall cybersecurity guidance for that is essentially a bunch of different international regulators agreed that this is the guidance or these are the recommendations for managing medical device cybersecurity. There was also an SBOM guidance. So there is an IMDRF international guidance focused on SBOM. It talks about two different things: medical device manufacturers, healthcare providers, so hospitals, and others, and talks about how those two things should flow. There's also a legacy guidance. So a legacy medical device is a device that cannot be reasonably protected against current cyber threats. This is a massive problem. The number of outdated, unsupported, vulnerable medical devices and other healthcare technologies out in use in the healthcare sector today is one of the main driving reasons that we have so many ransomware and other cyber incidents at hospitals. So this is a massive, massive problem that we, along with the sector, are trying to address. And this guidance is one of the efforts of trying to do that. For those of you who really really want to go deep on this graphic is incredibly useful for actually starting to break down the different roles and responsibilities for trying to manage a legacy, who's doing what at what times, etc. And then just to do some quick hits on other things that we're working on. Patients. We actually have a dedicated patient science and engagement program to work with patients on an ongoing basis to ensure that we're actually considering their perspectives during our work on medical devices. One of the primary ways we do this is through something called the Patient Engagement and Advisory Committee. And we have meetings on specific topics. So there's two that I would flag for the group. Materials related to these peak meetings are online. The first is the one that we held in September of 2019, specifically on cybersecurity and medical devices and how this impacts patients. And then there was another one in October 2020 on artificial intelligence and machine learning in medical devices. So we do regularly consult the peak and even outside of the peak, consult patients on how is medical device cybersecurity affecting you? How can we do better at making this an approachable topic that patients feel empowered to protect themselves and their loved ones from cyber threats? Independent security researchers. We love independent security researchers. We have worked with the community for really, I think almost or over 10 years now, specifically on independent discovery, disclosure, and coordinated vulnerability management of medical device cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We participate in the We Hard Hackers efforts. We routinely participate in the Biohacking Village at DEF CON and Black Hats in Vegas during the summer, and just generally fully support. If you are an independent security researcher and you find a medical device cybersecurity vulnerability, one, we want you to work with the medical device manufacturer to get that fixed. But also, if the medical device manufacturer isn't really playing ball, you can call us and we will happily take that information and work with you and with the medical device manufacturer to make sure the issue gets fixed. Other things that we're working on: Health Sector Coordinating Council. If you know it, then that's great. If you don't know it, don't worry about it. But it's a big public-private partnership on healthcare issues. We do a lot of work with the HSCC, and one of our big issues is on legacy. So there's a big 115-page report that took 3 years to write on managing legacy technology security in healthcare. We also contracted with MITRE, FDA specifically, to produce a report on legacy device issues, taking some of the pre-existing work and trying to identify next steps to actually help us make progress. Vulnerability communications. Talking about medical device cybersecurity vulnerabilities is really hard. I'm not even trying to be flip. It is really hard. Who you need to communicate to, when, on what timeline, what the communication needs to contain. Really, really, really difficult to nail down. So there is a group that's focused on this, and FDA is involved in it. The first tranche of documents was focused on patients. How do we make it easier to communicate to patients? There is a glossary, we always like to highlight this, that was created about how can you take complex cybersecurity lingo and make it patient friendly. So instead of saying attacker in the middle, say this. So if you are, for whatever reason, in the habit of writing cybersecurity communications and you're trying to communicate to lay audiences that may not have specialized expertise, that glossary may be of significant use. This working group is still going. It is now in its second phase, focused on how hospitals and medical device manufacturers share information. So as you can imagine, very fun group right now. We're also working on medical product manufacturing cybersecurity. So medical product manufacturing facilities are getting more and more connected. So the literal equipment that is manufacturing the medical device or the pharmaceutical or whatever it is in and of itself a smart device and could be exposed to cyber threats. So we're trying to work out how do we protect medical product manufacturing facilities from cybersecurity incidents and cyber threats. Threat modeling. If you're a medical device manufacturer, you just really like threat modeling and you want to know how to do it for medical devices, there is a playbook specifically focused on medical device threat modeling. Great resource. Our thanks to MDIC and MITRE for helping put it together. And last but not least, we have actually worked with a contractor and have put out a public resource on, okay, you are a healthcare organization. How do you prepare for and respond to a cyber incident involving a medical device? So there is a playbook associated with that. It was recently updated in 2022, and it contains a quick start guide that is essentially a bunch of questions of, if I'm trying to do this, where do I go to find information on that? And it will give you the specific section of the document to look at. So that's actually it for my presentation. I realized that I talked incredibly fast and covered quite a bit, so I am happy to take whatever questions folks may have. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, we do have a bunch of questions. Got one question here on cyber risks. So, of course, you know, FDA's been publishing these guidance documents for over a decade on cybersecurity, so it's not new, but it is evolving. And so one of the attendees is asking, you know, what can we expect from as a community of FDA's application of the guidances? What kind of evolution should we be expecting over the time of the next few years? What are some things that are on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the interesting thing for us is we for a very long time have been doing cybersecurity of medical devices. We've had reviewers who look specifically at cybersecurity of medical devices. What we haven't had is the explicit cybersecurity authority. And so this explicit cybersecurity authority really is a game changer for us in that it gives us such a stronger card to play in saying these medical devices must provide this reasonable assurance of cybersecurity. And the guidance is how we implement that. So we do expect a continual tightening of the screws, so to speak, on what we're going to demand from the medical device manufacturers in terms of how they actually demonstrate cybersecurity to their devices. And frankly, we're going to start not approving more and more things if they don't actually provide that demonstration. So our hope is that we can, in many ways, become that gateway where you've got to pass us and you've got to demonstrate to us that the device is cyber secure before you can get on the market. And in this way, we're keeping insecure, unsecure medical devices out of healthcare environments to begin with. I don't know that that answered the question, but hopefully it did.
Well, I think one other area that might be at the top of mind would be SBOM in that space, since tooling is evolving. Do you have anything you can mention on SBOM? Oh,
on SBOM specifically? Yeah, so SBOM is fun because it's maturing, right? Like even for the industry, it's not like it's an incredibly well-baked concept. So I do think the tooling is going to continue to evolve. I know that we are exploring tooling internal to the FDA. How do we make sure that as we are ingesting SBOMs, we are making the best use of them? So I do think over time, as both industry, FDA, and the tools available for SBOM analysis improve, we are going to improve.
Okay. Let's see, turning to a completely different topic, there's a question about, hey, you know, if somebody discovers a vulnerability in a medical device, if they have a difficult time getting a response from the manufacturer, what do you recommend they do? How would FDA like to be involved in that process? So
sure, and
vulnerability disclosure, effectively.
Okay, vulnerability disclosure. If you are having issues getting a hold of the medical device manufacturer, there's two things that you can do. Frankly, either of which will eventually get you to FDA, one of which is direct. You can contact FDA directly. CyberMed, so all one word, cybermed@fda.hhs.gov will get you directly to the medical device cybersecurity team at FDA. And if you tell us that you have been trying to disclose a vulnerability to a medical device manufacturer and they haven't been cooperating, we will have a conversation with both you and whoever we need to get that addressed. You can also report it to CISA. So if you reach out to CISA, CISA will also intake that information and attempt to work with that medical device manufacturer. They will also tell us. We do actually have an official memorandum of understanding where they tell us about medical device cybersecurity info and we tell them. So either way, we will find out about it.
I'm just glad to see that most of the manufacturers I'm aware of already have landing pages on how to report a vulnerability. Whether they actually follow their own procedures is a whole other matter, but
right.
It's comforting to see that certainly wasn't the case 15 years ago. So flipping topics again, more from the manufacturing perspective, we have questions about sort of rules of thumb when it comes to sunsetting operating systems. So in other words, getting into legacy operating systems, getting into patchability. So there's a very specific question about Windows, since Windows is so common. If a medical device manufacturer submits within 1 year of a Windows OS sunsetting, right? If Microsoft has said this is going to end support in 1 year from now, what should they expect a submission to be rejected? Basically, desk reject. What should be on their minds? What should go into calculus for their the risk management there?
Yeah, so I wish I could say that there was some kind of hard and fast answer that I can point to. There is not. But especially with the new authorities, we are expecting to see plans for replacement of software that is becoming unsupported. One, if you are submitting something that has unsupported software, that probably needs to come with a justification of why that is acceptable and does not present a risk that would concern the FDA or present a patient safety risk. For things that are still supported but are probably going to become supported in the near future, we are expecting to see and we recommend submitting explanations for how that piece of software is going to be replaced. So it's not that like, hey, like the Windows operating system is currently supported, but it's going to be unsupported 3 years from now. Our question is at 3 years or preferably before then, how are you replacing the operating system? So not if you are replacing the operating system with one that is supported, how and when are you replacing the operating system with something that's supported? So will it be rejected out of hand? Might depend on the reviewer, frankly. But you certainly will have a better time if you are coming in with a fully detailed plan of how that unsupported software will be replaced within a reasonable time.
And if you don't mind, I'll just add a little commentary because Windows 10, by the way, its sunset is in 1 year. So if you're still deploying or using Windows 10, Microsoft has announced in about 1 year it's out of service. And so to celebrate that, actually, in May at Archimedes, we're going to be holding a costume contest at a marching jazz funeral costume contest for Windows 10 patches. And so people get to dress up as their end of service patch for Windows 10 as we do a funeral for that operating system. Let's see. We've got a couple questions about following up on this topic on patching. And so between guidance and statute, could you comment a little bit about where in the landscape of the law, as well as some of the regulatory guidance, is something must be patchable? What are some of the documents that manufacturers might want to be reminded of when trying to understand where this requirement versus recommendation is coming from?
So so it depends. If you are a cyber device, so you are a medical device, and to answer a question that I saw in the list, that is an and. So those 3 provisions: has software, has the ability to connect, vulnerable to cyber threats. That's an and. You have to hit all 3 of those to be considered a cyber device. If you are a cyber device, and so you came in after March 29th, 2023, you must be patchable by law. That is in the statute itself, that you must be patchable. For anything that was approved prior to that, that patchability requirement is seen as part of safety and effectiveness. Because again, cybersecurity exists across the total product lifecycle. Cybersecurity must be maintained across the total product lifecycle, and it is extremely likely to the point of vanishing possibility that you cannot maintain a cybersecure device without patching it at some point in that device's lifecycle. So to maintain safety and effectiveness under FDA, just the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, your device probably needs to be patchable. We've run into this in the past where people are like, well, our device just isn't patchable. And that's fun for everybody involved, because we still have to figure out how to address the patient safety risk. So I would say, to maybe sum up what has become a very rambling answer, cyber devices, the patchability requirement is in law. Anything that is not a cyber device or was approved prior to March 29th, 2023, the patchability is part of safety and effectiveness.
Right. So I would imagine almost everything would fall into the statute with those three ands. I'd be hard pressed to find a device.
Yeah.
Maybe a tongue depressor?
I mean, yeah, for things that have no digital components whatsoever, yeah, you might not be a cyber device, but for most other things, I think you are in fact correct that it will be very difficult to not qualify.
So we have some other questions on sort of what qualifies as a cyber device or connect to internet. And in my mind, I'm thinking, Bluetooth connections, proprietary RF, Ethernet ports, Wi-Fi, all these ways support connections to the internet. But I don't know if I'm off base, but I'm sure there's some other people on the webinar who are curious about, are there some mechanisms that are obvious yeses and others that are it depends?
I mean, I think we think the obvious ones are some of the ones that I listed, like Bluetooth, right? Bluetooth by specification connects to the internet. If you have an Ethernet cable, by specification, Ethernet connects to the internet. So we've had some interesting conversations with folks about like USB, right? Well, a USB isn't exactly a direct internet connection, but it can be, right? You can have USB-based wireless dongles where you stick the wireless USB in, and now this thing suddenly is able to connect to the internet. So it can be very case-by-case basis, but generally speaking, I would say FDA is taking a very appropriately broad view of what has the ability to connect means, and we would encourage manufacturers to do the same.
Right. Let's see, we've got a large number of questions. We're probably not going to get through them all. And Jessica, certainly if you see any that, call out to you, you're welcome to go ahead and respond to one in particular. But there is a question that's probably a little bit more in the IEC space, different standards to follow. There are so many standards. Maybe you could comment on some of the FDA recognized consensus standards, or have there been any recently recognized consensus standards that relate to cybersecurity that maybe people are less aware of? But then, of course, there are a bunch of general ones that have been around for a while. So,
yeah, so standards are not my strong suit.
Okay.
I do know that the TIRs, TIR 90, I believe it's 97 and possibly 57 from AMI are ones that get pretty frequently referenced. They have now become an official software standard whose number I do not know. But what I would recommend is if you were interested in standards that could be relevant to helping you get through a pre-market submission for cybersecurity, I would go look at the guidance, because it cites specific standards that may be relevant, including some of the IECs, ISOs, and so on. What I would say, because we do know that this comes up, is there one standard that you can pick up and follow and have it contain every part of the submission that you're going to need? No. You are going to need to either look at multiple different standards, or there are going to be things that don't currently have a standard associated with them. So standards are definitely helpful. They are not on their own going to be sufficient to get you through a review. So Kevin, what I was thinking is I might actually just start hitting on a bunch of the different questions, because I think some of these have some pretty quick hit answers.
Okay.
So the first question in the list that I'm seeing is, are subject matter experts involved in creating guidance documents for FDA regulated industries? Yes. One, just working with the team in whatever manner that happens, we get that comment, but guidance documents go out for public comment, and then anyone can comment on them. And FDA by law is required to read and respond to all of those comments. So yes, I will tell you, and I'm not exaggerating the number, we had 102,000 public comments to the pre-market cybersecurity guidance, and we responded to each and every single one of them. So yes, SMEs are very much involved. So the next question was, in a pre-market review, can information on the quality management system be requested, as typically those are not part of the pre-market reviews? In the pre-market review itself, unlikely, unless there is some kind of a specific justified use case. But what I will say, because I think this is a little bit more where this question gets interesting, cybersecurity is fair game in inspections. So if you are a medical device manufacturer, you may be getting questions as part of your in inspection, either a routine or other inspection. And that's where those quality management systems are going to be coming in. All right, are class 1 devices required to follow this rule and guidance? So if a class 1 device is a cyber device, absolutely. Because there's a difference, right, between a class 1 device and like something that has to come in for submission. The things that are coming in for submission, you have to present the documentation to FDA as part of the submission. But even for things that don't have to be part of the submission, you still have to do these things as part of your quality management system. There's just a difference of whether or not you have to submit the documentation to FDA. So are class 1 devices required to follow the rule? Yes. Are we always going to see that information? Not unless it's required to come in for a submission. How is this incorporated into the medical device single audit program? I'm not enough of an MD SAP expert to say, but again, I would go back to that element of cybersecurity as fair game for inspections, and we are working with our partners internationally through the International Medical Device Regulators Forum on those guidances. So I would say, you know, there's increasing interest, there's increasing convergence on some of this internationally. We answered the question on, are the cyber device attributes about the cyber device definition ANDed or ORed? They are ANDed. You have to meet all 3 criteria to be a cyber device. Hi, Bryn. Bryn is asking, regarding the manufacturing cybersecurity, does it have to also be considered in the submission? This is not, this again, we're getting a little bit outside my area of expertise. I would go back to the inspections. I don't think, except for certain types of PMAs, pre-market approvals, that information on manufacturing has to come in as part of the submission. But like, if information does have to come in as part of the submission, you are not going to go wrong in including information on the cybersecurity of your manufacturing environment. If information on your manufacturing environment doesn't have to come in as part of the submission, cybersecurity is still fair game as part of the inspections, where that could come up. I'm actually new.
There's one question here that I think might, there's a question about follow-up to your, will that be rejected? And, you know, might depend on a reviewer. So there's a question about, and I think this cuts maybe to the focal point program of what efforts the agency is making to eliminate inconsistency between reviewers.
Yes, so there is a focal point program specifically focused on cybersecurity, and having reviewed it and worked alongside the person who runs the cybersecurity focal point, there is a lot of training that is currently ongoing, both on the law, on cybersecurity generally. I can tell you the cybersecurity focal point group meets every week to talk about cybersecurity issues. So it's going to continue to be a learning process. I think many of you know that reviewers typically range in expertise. They're nurses, they're chemists, they're physicians. And so we are trying to arm them with the best information and the best training that they have to make sure that we're having consistent responses and consistent expertise for completing cybersecurity reviews.
And I would also imagine that, you know, there have been so many changes, not just in policy, but with statute, consistency will be very different over time. So what may have been a year ago could be completely irrelevant, since the omnibus bill was just getting codified back then.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
we have just a couple more minutes. So maybe if you see one that
let me
or
scroll
two that you
through
might be able to get
here.
to.
I will say the RTA policy has expired. There's one question in here. So there's something called the refuse to accept policy for I think it was 180 days, but I could have my dates wrong. FDA essentially said we will not outright reject files that are coming in that require the cybersecurity information and may not have all of it. We will work collaboratively with the manufacturer. The RTA guidance is expired. That expired on October 1st. But if you are in fact a cybersecurity reviewer, this person who is asking this question, and so you're an FDA staffer, ask Matt. Just email Matt and ask him. He is going to be your number one source on that. So interesting question here. Does FDA have requirements for a manufacturer on how long they have to patch based on severity, risk to patient safety? I would point you to the medical device reporting guidance. So this is a complicated question. This is essentially about legacy and how long devices have to be reported. But I will point you to question 4.12 in the medical device reporting guidance. So this is not even the cybersecurity guidance. This is the medical device reporting guidance, which talks about how long medical devices have to essentially, you as a manufacturer have to be prepared to handle complaints, medical device reports. My cats are about to start fighting in the background. I apologize. I would look at question.
Is your cat's name Patches, by the way?
No, that is Taz. That one's Taz. Okay. But yeah, I would go look at that guidance. And actually, we're at 12:58, so Kevin, I will defer to you if you want to do more questions, if you want to close out.
So I think what we want to do is just begin to close things out, but maybe I'll ask, there's obviously a lot more questions, and I'm curious about opportunities for, any of our attendees to ask questions in the future. For instance, there's the IMDRF event coming up in March. Are there other events where there might be opportunities for individuals to ask these more specific questions, or what would they do if they'd like a Q-sub related to cybersecurity?
So I think I attempted to do it, but realized that the chat function is not limited to attendees. But cybermed@fda.hhs.gov will get you to the cyber team. So if you have a specific question, you can contact the cyber team, and we will happily respond. There is the IMDRF that's coming up. There will be several. I mean, when I say several, I think I mean hundreds of FDA staff present. We will have at least one or two members of the cyber team, but I would recommend, if you have a specific question, go to CyberMed. If you have a Q-sub, I would go to the Q-sub guidance and follow the instructions there to make sure that you're reaching the right people and through the right mechanisms.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for taking an hour to work with our attendees and try to answer their questions. I know we have more. We can't get to everything. So thank you again so much, Jessica, for the presentation today. This has been a great seminar, the UCSF-Stanford CERSI FDA Distinguished Speaker Series on cybersecurity for biomedical engineering. Thanks, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.